Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you from the Colonial Dungeon, this is the Court-Martail Podcast! Introducing your host for this evening, he has a bald spot on the top of his head, and he weighs in tonight at a number you don't need to know. He is the Colonial Loudmouth, Sean McCarty! Hello everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the Court-Martail Podcast here that sounds very similar to a drive-by, but I assure you it's not. It is not a drive-by. It is a special add-on, a postscript epilogue of what you heard earlier this week. In fact, just yesterday on the Court-Martail Podcast with my good friend and co-host, Josh Ageddon. It was great to have him there, but there were some things that we did not get to discuss that I want to make sure I get the time and use the time that I have right here to be able to talk about just a little bit, just to get everybody's minds in the same place, because I was asked and requested to speak on a couple different topics, and I want to get those topics in the show this week before they become old news, which happens so often, is that there's just so much to talk about, as we say every week. But we just didn't get the chance to do it this week. But I'm going to address it here, because here, at least, we're going to, there's no filter, there's no co-host, and there's no just trying to make a decision as to what to present. This is just a full-fledged presentation. Now, the first topic I want to discuss is the one that was requested the most when I was getting ready to do this podcast, and that is Regis Philbin. Everybody was going to talk about Regis Philbin after Regis passed away. For those of you who don't know, Regis Philbin passed away at the age of 88, which is a hell of a run. And it's really in this moment that I didn't realize, at least, just how much influence Regis Philbin had on professional wrestling, namely the WWF, primarily and only and strictly the WWF. But it's been a fascinating set of research to kind of go back and see what and where the imprint on professional wrestling Regis Philbin left. Well, first, Regis was a huge classy Freddie Blassie fan. And Freddie Blassie, if you guys haven't seen, and I do want to do eventually a superstar spotlight on Fred Blassie, because he's got such a captivating career, and more than that, who he is and the legacy he has as a professional wrestler is timeless. But I think that as most sports entertainment fans kind of dwindle away from caring about the past, I feel it is more and more important to acknowledge and respect people like classy Freddie Blassie. So, Freddie Blassie, he often was back and forth as a wrestler between New York and California. Those are his two pieces of bread and butter. We're right there. I mean, there was a match, and I mentioned it a couple times, where a babyface Fred Blassie was taking on Wild Red Barry, who became a popular manager, and I think had done some sitcom work as well. He actually made it in some television to some description, if I'm not mistaken. But it was Wild Red Barry and Freddie Blassie Fred as a babyface in a 2 out of 3 falls match. Which is a 4-part on YouTube if you want to go check it out. It's worth the watch if you're willing to sit and watch very slow but methodical and good in-ring psychology. It's worth it to go take a look at that match. So what we've got is, truthfully, Freddie Blassie, he's the one, and many people have coined and have used the phrase pencil neck geeks in the years since, but I don't think many people know that phrase and the popularity of that phrase is derived almost solely and initially by classy Freddie Blassie and all his promos that he did and all the stuff that he was talking about. And And he used Pencil Neck Geeks all the time to talk about the fans, to talk about the opponents of the guy that he was facing. Blassie was so good at putting over his talent rather than putting over him as talent, as a manager. Most people know him as a manager. I think he was a very fun wrestler to watch, at least in the matches that I've seen of Freddie Blassie. But it's Fred Blassie, who was fairly popular in Hollywood, was known throughout all of New York, worked a lot for WWF, and the thing I'm trying to get to with this is that Regis saw Fred Blassie and saw what Fred Blassie was and how captivating he was, and that made Blassie and Philbin, they ended up becoming close friends. And as Regis was getting his way onto television, Freddie Blassie was instrumental in really getting Regis off the ground, because a lot of people knew and respected Freddie Blassie, and he and Blassie ended up becoming very good friends. And there's a great little piece on YouTube. It's from one of WWE's Confidential series back that they did in 2003 or somewhere in there, and they talk a lot about this was right when Blassie passed, and they talk about Regis. They talk about him and Regis, and how I guess Regis messed up Blassie's hair, and Blassie broke his finger, and now Regis always had that broken finger. And they showed a clip of Regis and Blassie sitting together on one of their shows, and Regis said, I've got this broken little finger, and Blassie's like, that's right, and now you'll always be thinking of me. And Regis said, you know why I got this? For messing with his hair. And he messed Blassie's hair and ran as Blassie got up and threw the chair down the hallway. It was great. Regis had his own level of charisma that had taken a life of its own. And really, it was that relationship with Blassie that ended up creating something of a relationship between him and, I assume, Vincent J, and then eventually Vincent K, because as the 80s rolled on, as the 70s and 80s rolled on, as Philbin was becoming a major influence in modern day Americana, I guess would be the word to say, or pop culture, as Regis was really getting a prominent stage on that, then that's when the Rock and Wrestling Connection broke out, and WWF was about to launch WrestleMania, and that's when they got people like Hogan on the show. And really the main talk show, morning show that was displaying pro wrestling on a scale that reached national homes was Regis Philbin. And Regis had multiple people on the show involved in the pro wrestling sphere, in the pro wrestling circle, as the 80s rolled on, as the 90s rolled on. I believe Regis at one point, I don't know if he was still on the show, he may have actually aged out of it by the time that they got, I think Cody Rhodes was on the show. But in any event, Regis was always a huge wrestling fan. There's a photo that Hogan posted, which is really fascinating. Regis Philbin was jacked. Regis was, it was Hogan posing with Regis, and Regis has got some guns. Regis was pretty bulked up at the time, and it's a testament really to what Regis was, and how much he loved pro wrestling, and how much pro wrestling really loved him back. But really getting WWF on that national stage and really getting, I would argue, a really good number of eyes on the product, part of that was promotion, and part of that promotion is in part due to Regis. Because Regis had no problem having these guys on their show to talk about what they needed to talk about. That's the kind of stuff that I personally love as a pro wrestling fan, is when celebrities who are wrestling fans but are not, I don't know how to put it, because there's such a fine line between celebrities like working matches, because there's just been too much of it now. But at the same time, there is also when somebody who's a wrestling fan is able to help the wrestling business by helping promote the wrestling business in the way that Regis did. You never saw Regis get in the ring or do an angle with with somebody. He was just a talk show guy. But he was the talk show guy that was so good at doing the talk show, he was so good at being the talk show guy that the audiences helped gravitate to that, and then they saw how much fun he had with wrestling, and then they went to wrestling. So Regis really is such an instrumental part of what the WWF became, and I don't think he ever got the credit for being such an influence and impact on pro wrestling and specifically WWF. And on that basis, I really have to say I do respect Regis, and I'm happy that all this came out about Regis. It's sad that it only happened at the time of his passing, otherwise I'm sure that Philbin would have been inducted into the Hall of Fame prior to now. But of course, this is WWE we're talking about, so it's only when somebody important to them dies that they decide to put him in the Hall of Fame and make money off them. And that's the only time they really care about about people like that. And it's just, which is just depressing. But Regis, I mean, there's a legacy that Regis has in the talk show world, without a doubt. Regis is a huge pop culture icon. But he also has an important place in pro wrestling, starting from his friendship with Freddie Blassie and going all the way up until his passing just recently at 88. Hell of a run for Regis, hell of a run for his life and what he was able to do, and the way that he captivated crowds and used his charisma to really make a name for himself. A true talent and somebody that will be missed. And I know that he and Blassie are now sitting at a table next to each other, having a drink and laughing with each other. And that, no matter where they are, that's a heartwarming thought. Especially, I mean, you see, there's also a clip of Regis's show, Regis and Kelly, in 2003 when Freddie passed. And you could see the mourning in his eyes, in Regis's eyes, when he announces that Freddie Blassie had passed away, and even Kelly was upset about that. It's just there's something to be said about a relationship like that led to such good business all the way around, but also was just a good friendship. So we're gonna miss you, Regis. I miss Freddie Blassie as well, but it's I wanted to just touch on it because he's a big part of pro wrestling, and he deserves the accolade. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the other thing that people have been asking me about incessantly, and I have just not had the time to respond to it. But I want to talk about Impact and what Impact has been doing recently as far as the acquisition of their talent and getting a lot of those guys who were released by WWE earlier this year, thanks to pandemic-related concerns, I suppose. And this is what I've come to expect out of this, right? TNA has gotten such a bad reputation for all the time. I mean, all the while they hired and brought in this brand new talent, they also had their world champion female try to hold them hostage for $150,000, purely for the fact that she just wanted more money for a belt that cost maybe like a tenth of that, if that, probably less than that. Actually, probably way less. Probably cost a hundredth of that. Probably cost $1,500. And then they said no, and now Tessa's no longer with Impact. So, and they used that $150,000 that Tessa thought was her worth to come back and drop the belt, which for Tessa, and to hold a place like Impact hostage like that, it's just laughable. But in any event, it's one of those things where Impact now has chosen to get a lot of people back that they didn't have before, launch some new people who are really good workers or can prove themselves to be good workers that did not get the respect they deserved in the WWE. And I think that TNA, say what you want about TNA, their booking, say for people like Joey Ryan and Tessa Blanchard, well, okay, maybe this isn't the statement I was hoping to make. TNA and Impact have had a record of potential, we'll put it there, as far as putting decent people with decent people and having them work. And now that they've got a roster where they've got some good-looking guys who know how to work and can work, and they can really try to build these people, do I see Impact making a major resurgence? Not really. I think the damage is done with Impact. However, there have been a lot more people talking about it recently than not, and if they could get themselves a deal that could see them on more households, and they could put themselves in more households, I think that if they were able to re-establish who these people are and why you should care about them and the history they have without just hitting a factory reset on Impact, but with the talent they have, they could probably build some people back up and gain some viewership back with the people that they've got. I'm not saying that they will, because this is Impact, so they always seem to find a way to make themselves laughable, especially when they've got good potential like this. And if that's not the story of TNA, the story of TNA is just wasted potential. That's really the long and short of what TNA and Impact is. You know, it had so much potential at first to compete, or at least be an alternative to the WWE, and then they decided to go the let's be WCW route. Then, on the flip side of that coin, they then start tanking thanks to Russo's booking and Spike finding out that Russo was booking, and on that basis, they ended up losing a lot of people. And then it was just bad network after bad network, Dixie Carter, ownership changes, and there was a lot of potential in the middle there to have quality feuds and impressive impressive conflicts and things of that ilk. And they just always had one issue after another issue after another issue, with either talent being small and petty and named Austin Aries, or they had just booking that didn't make sense, or their talent was just too, I don't know how to put it. Their talent was too much of the belief that it's supposed to be performative art instead of an athletic competition or a simulated athletic competition. There was too much of the, how do I put this? There's too much of the entertainment rather than the sport. But I feel like in this scenario, in this situation now, they've got a set of talent that if you cultivate them right, can very much be deemed instead as actually, you could see more wrestling out of it, I guess would be the way I'd put it. There's more potential to see wrestling out of Impact than goofy, hokey dick flip, Ken Shamrock taking the dick flip, female winning World Heavyweight Championship from the pro wrestling context alone. You're going to see, I think you would be more likely to see less of that taking place with the guys they have now. I think Impact realized once this whole speaking out thing came along that they made some goofs. That's the way I'll put it. They made some goofs in their booking. And I think that if they can keep their eyes on the prize here, and they can somehow negotiate a way to get some level of better network deal to get more eyes on the product, they could have something of a resurgence. I think they now have the talent to do so, more so than they did just 3 weeks ago. You know, but it's really up to TNA. They've once again reached a potential. You know, they've always had potential to do good things, and they have done good things, but because of the reputation they've gained about wasting potential elsewhere, they've lost it's like the boy who cried wolf. It's like the promotion that cried wrestling. They cried wrestling. People went to see it. There was none, or they did something dumb, or some conflict of interest happened backstage. So the fans went away, and then they cried wrestling again, and they tried coming back, and and then another thing like that happened, and now they've got another way they've got another reason to cry wrestling, but who knows whether the fans are going to come back this time. They may have wrestling this time, and everyone's going to be like, nah, you already lost your chance. That's where the whole "let's all laugh at TNA" bit came from. You know, that was where it began, and that's where it developed, and hopefully they will be able to kind of steer the ship right, and also fire Josh Matthews, and maybe we'll see more. I want to see more out of TNA. I think we can see more out of TNA now, but it's going to require certain things to happen. They're going to have a better network deal. They're going to have to figure out what the hell Anthem's doing, because Anthem just declared Chapter 11, I think. Or they got one of those small business loans, or I forget what the actual details of that are, but that's going to be a huge, huge loss to them. And you know, I hope that TNA doesn't become collateral damage in that respect. Just as they're getting going, and they made all these good hires, and one can only hope that this is the beginning of something new for Impact, that they can actually use practically and efficiently, and in a way that makes what they've done in the past either less of a burden to weigh on their shoulders, or can be used in some cumulative way that makes all of us look better for holding off hope and holding on to hope that Impact Wrestling might one day improve. But the potential is there. But the potential is there, but the execution remains to be seen. And I hope that we can see better days ahead. But that is something that we will have to wait to find out. And that being said, that is all I got for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this special edition of the Court-Martail podcast. We will see you next time. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be right back after these messages.